Here we go. Welcome to Walkabout the Galaxy, the traveling astronomy podcast, where the science is universal, the opinions are personal, and the chemistry is undeniable.
Sure. Sure.
I can deny chemistry.
Chemistry. I do like chemistry.
Is denying chemistry like when you're like, I'm really not attracted to that person?
It's that kind of chemistry.
Yeah.
Come on.
All right.
We are Strange, Charm, and Top the Astroquarks, also known as Josh Caldwell, Addie Dove, and Jim Cooney, coming to you from the Walkabout Studios at the University of Central Florida. Our stumpers are aeronautical.
Uh-oh.
Sort of. Mostly.
National Aeronautical?
No.
NASA.
Jim,
Yes, sir.
So formal today.
would you like it in the original or in the English?
You're giving suppers in other languages now?
Well, these are both words that have been adopted by English from another language. So I'll give it to you in English.
Wait, is this the stumper?
No, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you in English.
Free
and then-
stumper,
English
stumper.
then.
And
Yeah.
the first thing you do is identify what language they're adopted from.
Okay.
Dirigible or Montgolfier.
Oh, come on.
I don't know the second one. I mean, the dirigible, I know the word. It's like a zeppelin.
Uh-huh.
Also known as a big balloon.
Big balloon. A blimp.
A blimp, yeah.
I don't know the second word.
It's balloon.
It sounds
in
French.
Montgolfier. They're both French words. Dirigible.
Yeah.
A dirigible means steerable, or you can direct where it goes. So
Okay.
it's not a hot air balloon.
Right.
Blimp.
It's like a zeppelin, as you said.
Right.
So you can dirige where it goes.
Right.
It's dirigible.
I'm very dirigible too.
It's directable,
Right.
right? Or a Montgolfier, that's a hot air balloon.
A hot air balloon.
Oh,
I did
yeah.
Invented by the French brothers Montgolfier.
Oh,
Obviously.
interesting.
Yeah, so they went up with, what was in their first flight of the Montgolfier? It's like a rooster, one of them and a rooster and a goat or something like that.
Weird.
Were they doing
flew
goat
over
yoga
Paris.
back then?
Well, now that I know all
I
that,
don't
I'm
know what
going
that
for
is.
dirigible because
It's way cooler.
the connection is, or the reason I like it is it's steerable.
Yeah.
So they used to use that use those for mail service
Oh.
across the Atlantic mail service
Oh.
and stuff like that.
Transatlantic mail
Transatlantic
service.
mail service.
Oh.
And I have some
How come that
stamps
didn't-
from
You have some
from the
with dirigibles on them?
from what's the one? The Hindenburg.
That's the
yeah,
one.
that's
In
right.
fact, got those from
That's me.
the other aftercourt.
Yeah,
Her family or her man's family
Yeah.
cool.
had some of those. Pretty cool.
So you're
Anyway.
Found a box
you're
of
going for
stamps.
the steerable.
Yeah, I like to be able to steer.
I was just
Okay.
at NASA Ames this week.
Yes.
And they have a giant hangar there. It's called Hangar 1.
Yeah.
But that used to be for a giant dirigible.
Oh.
And it's super huge. It's super cool, but they took the skin off of it because it was full of asbestos, and so it's just the frame now. So it's this giant open building. It's really cool looking now, but they're supposed to reskin it at some point. But
So
they also
it's not really,
fly.
it's
Not used
steel
right now.
ribs.
It's just steel ribs right now.
I mean, if it's raining and you're in that
You would be
giant
very
building,
wet.
you're just wet.
Yeah.
Because you're outside.
Yeah, but they do actually have blimps that fly from a couple of the different hangars there, like commercially.
Your choice is quadcopter or hovercraft.
Do those come from Latin?
No, you don't have to identify the language.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
Quadcopter.
Sure.
Are the hovercraft just a quadcraft? Just
A hovercraft.
I can't words.
I actually.
Is it just is a quadcopter
They're-
just a type of hovercraft?
No,
Are they
a hovercraft is really specifically for going over the water.
Right.
But it's has these giant fan blades and then this skirt around it,
Right.
and so it inflates that skirt. It's not really hovering. It's using the
It's crafting
air to inflate, to sort of like make a big air cushion that it's basically floating on.
Yeah.
Right.
And cruises across. And I actually rode on a
You're fun.
hovercraft many years ago across the English Channel. So there's a lot of them in use for transport, for just sort of common
That
ferry
makes sense.
service in that part
Do
of the
they
world.
call them hovercrafts?
If they're speaking English, they do.
Huh.
And
I don't
French.
know- in French, I don't. The hovercraft.
Sure.
Dirigible.
I don't know what they're called in French.
Okay.
Actually, I should find out.
Can I ask my little lingo?
Well, there's a reason for those sorts of choices today.
There is.
That relates to one of the
Celebration of-
topics we'll be talking about.
Celebration of the Dragonfly mission selection. Woo!
Yesterday, NASA announced its next New Frontiers mission will be Dragonfly.
Which is a mission to Titan. We've actually talked about it on the podcast before, but we'll talk about it a bunch.
Yeah, so for the New Frontiers is sort of NASA's big PI or principal investigator-led mission programs, the first of which...
This is the most expensive version?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most expensive planetary
Yeah,
spacecraft.
and I don't think that there are any other sort of PI, principal, like individual person who proposes a mission, led missions that are bigger than New Frontiers in any part of NASA, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I guess like in like Astro and in Helio, they're mostly like
They're
Earth
these
orbiting, so they can
mid-X
be smaller
explorers
maybe.
and things like that. They're usually, the budget...
The great observatories don't have pretty high budgets.
They do, but they're not PI led. They're
Oh, that's true.
institutional,
They're
right? Yeah.
institutional.
So,
So the difference there is that PI, principal investigators, can come from a university or from anywhere, and it's usually a scientist who's leading
Right.
it versus institutional-led is like a NASA center or JPL or somebody built it.
right. So like NASA decided to do Cassini, and they are like running the show. For this, they put out a call and they say, we're soliciting proposals for big missions. Here are the constraints. Propose away.
What are roughly the constraints on dollars?
Roughly $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Yeah, and a significant fraction of that it goes towards the cost of the launch,
Yeah.
which is expensive. You have to buy the rocket.
You know, big old rocket
Buy
to
the
get
launch
things
service.
far
Right.
out.
Right.
Ooh, what launcher
So-
are they going to use? I don't know.
That I don't know, but NASA selected 2 finalists for what they call Phase A study a few years ago,
Yes.
Dragonfly and Caesar.
Caesar.
Right.
And they've
So we're
done
going to
their-
give props to several of our colleagues here at UCF who were on that Caesar proposal. So
Yeah.
it's bittersweet. I think the Dragonfly thing is
Yeah.
awesome. We'll talk a little more about it. But
Yeah.
obviously our friends here at the University of Central Florida were
little
minorly
bit bummed
bummed that
Maybe
Caesar
seriously
would-
bummed.
Yeah.
And it's something of a surprise. Yeah, we'll come back to that a little bit.
Okay. Talk more
later.
about both of them in a little bit.
We've also got some science related to another interesting moon in the solar system that is also the target of a spacecraft mission.
Our moon.
No. Jeez. Moon.
Like, the moon is great.
Uh huh.
I'm not. All right, never mind.
You're
I was,
over
I was
it?
gonna. I was about to pick
You're gonna go on a
a
rant?
fight with Charm Cork, but I will not do that because she
About the
always
moon.
wins these fights. About the moon.
Do you guys remember that there was a really terrible like YouTube video with some little like hamsters and they were singing "We Love the Moon"? I'm gonna find that video and we'll post it.
I don't remember. I don't think I've ever encountered that.
It's so great.
No, the moon I was speaking of was, of course,
Europa.
right, target of the Europa Clipper mission, which is under development. And Europa, like Titan, is one of these sort of biologically interesting places.
Right. Very different. Right. Titan is cool because it has this big, thick atmosphere and cool hydrocarbons and things like that. Europa very cool because it's covered in ice, which seems to be covering a liquid water ocean.
A global ocean. Right.
And where you got a global ocean,
You've got giant serpents or something
Yeah,
like
you got-
that.
you
It's
never
like
get to do.
the movie Europa Report.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Which we
So there you go. Just watch that. We don't need to send a mission there.
There
We
you
already
go.
Wow,
done
that
it.
movie was so good.
Somebody's already done it.
I was just looking up the video and laughing. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'll post it.
So we'll talk about missions to those 2 moons and what's interesting about those 2 moons. Do we have anything in the astrophysics side top?
Well, we can mention a quick thing about fast radio bursts.
Okay.
FRBs.
FRBs for short,
All
because
right.
we don't ever want to say anything in a long way.
No.
Yes.
Astro burst is too long.
But first, this episode of Walkabout the Galaxy is brought to you by drones. While the name may sound like we're droning on, drones are the silent workers keeping your world in shape. From the board drones of Star Trek to quadcopters surveying farmland or checking out your roof or your neighbor's backyard, to masked and anonymous professional Mexican wrestler Hombre Drone Bala Jr. But we got our start helping keep the world fed. Drone male bees have no stingers or pollinating duties. They really just want to mate with a queen. Drones. Reach out and touch someone.
Thanks, drones.
Thanks, drones.
All
I was
over
a
the
little,
place.
I was a little worried where that was going to go. I was afraid it was going to be all Borgy, and I was going to be.
Oh yeah, no,
I was
that's
nervous.
just one of drones are everywhere.
That's
This
true.
idea, they're ubiquitous, doing all sorts of things.
You see them pop up all the time
This-
at events now. Little drones floating overhead, taking video.
Yeah,
like
starts
that.
of races. All the races I run,
Oh, yeah.
there's not all of them, but any of the big ones, there's a drone that catches video of the starting
There
group.
couldn't be drones at all of the races. There'd be too many.
There are many, many drones. That's the
I'm
point.
just teasing.
And the male drone bees, so a drone,
Mhm.
they're not like drone bees. A drone is a male bee
Yes.
that has only one parent. It comes from an
Life
unfertilized
finds
egg.
a way.
And there's a super complicated name for how that thing does its thing. and becomes an animal instead of just a
It's
cell.
an immaculate conception.
Kind of,
Wow.
yeah. And there are a bunch of them, and their only duty is to duty with the queen.
Yeah. Go to the bathroom with the
Good life.
Yeah. Anyway, reach out and touch someone. Original sponsor, message, note, quiz time. Seriously, you don't know that?
I do, but I
A
don't.
phone company,
It is some kind of phone company.
but I don't know which.
Like Bell?
AT&T.
The original one and only phone company from before it was broken apart by
Ma Bell.
by the government for antitrust. So the
Oh.
original AT&T was
Yeah.
the one and only phone provider.
When did that happen? When did it get broken up?
80s,
Okay.
early-ish 80s.
I feel like we always had AT&T for our phone service. This is not a sponsorship for AT&T.
You did always have AT&T if you kept AT&T after they broke AT&T
I'm sure my
up,
parents did, yeah.
because they're still now on AT&T, but it's not the same AT&T that was pre-80s. Any guesses? So you know the song, reach out
Oh,
and
yeah.
touch someone.
Mhm.
Anyway, when did that, the second part of that, you have to guess when that slogan originated.
1957.
1969.
How about the song? You're both wrong, of course.
Of course.
Let's ask a
You
different
can't
question.
get like 1 year. Yeah, you're not in the right decade, either one of you.
Crap.
For either answer, either the original slogan or the famous
The
song.
song is in the 80s.
I don't know.
The song was 79 and the original slogan was the 20s.
Oh.
Oh,
Woof.
That's
all
a
right.
lot.
I almost went 30s, but I thought that was too far.
Yeah,
Wow. Phones. They've been around for a long time.
they have. Phones and drones.
Phones and drones.
Yes.
Mm.
Well, drones and clones. No clones, just drones.
What are you mumbling
Drones and phones.
about? Okay.
So,
Science.
space news.
Space news.
Asteroid airburst.
Asteroid. I guess Falcon Heavy launch. Space news.
There was the third launch, the Falcon Heavy,
It was at
earlier
night.
this week.
Did you go outside?
I did not.
Did you go outside?
It was 2:30 in the morning,
It
dude.
was 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Originally, it was scheduled for 11:30, and
Uh-huh.
we planned on going out, but then
I'm disappointed in both of
It
you.
was, yeah.
I watched it.
One of the interesting things
I
that
was in
happens when you
California.
live here and there are launches is you're like, well, I'll catch the next one.
But this was the first Falcon Heavy night launch.
I'll see one
and you
someday.
get to hear the sonic booms at night.
I'll see one someday and hear one someday.
Yeah.
Don't.
It's vindictive.
Just kidding.
What did I do to you?
You didn't
What's
go
it-
see the launch, and I wasn't here, so I couldn't.
I didn't do it out of solidarity with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
don't believe
if
that.
Addie can't see this, I'm not going to see
But
it.
I want everyone else to see it if I can.
Everyone else did see it,
I
just
know.
you and I.
Phil posted
missed
about it. He said he could hear both sonic booms,
Yeah.
both sets of sonic booms.
So
Which is
it's
pretty exciting because
it's-
at night you can hear them.
So with the Falcon Heavy, they've got the central rocket and then two
Central
sort of strap-on. Essentially, it's a triple
Side
Falcon
boosters.
9,
Mhm.
and the side boosters come back and land here at the coast.
Mhm.
And the central one, they try to land it on a barge, but they're 1 for 3 for the central core.
Yeah, and they
successful
actually are 0 for 3
in
in
getting it back.
recovery because
'Cause
the
that one
last
fell over.
one fell over when they were shipping it back because the
It's
seas
a-
were rough or something.
Yeah,
It wasn't
it's
tied
amazing
down
to
right.
me that they don't always fall over. Actually.
I mean, they have some sort of clamps to hold them down, but yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
It's a very big lever arm.
Yeah, I don't totally know how those clamps work either because they don't know exactly where it's going to land.
No,
Like-
I think they have little drones actually that go out.
See?
And, yeah.
Drones.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, helping keep things going.
But the 2 side boosters were reused,
Uh-huh.
and then they landed again, so they can reuse them again hopefully. The
Right.
center core obviously hadn't been reused because we haven't succeeded in getting one back.
Right.
And it has slightly different architecture because it's in the center.
So that happens.
And then they caught half of a fairing. Miss Tess. So
Oh.
they renamed. I saw a lot of good memes about this because they renamed the ship that's trying to catch the fairings.
So the
with a big
fairing
net.
is this sort of aerodynamic clamshell that covers the payload while it's going through the atmosphere.
Yeah, and they have 2 halves, so it separates, and they've been trying to catch those because it'd be really nice to recover
They're
them.
worth a few million.
They're worth some amount of money. That's nice to not have to shell out every time. And they caught, and so they,
They have this.
renamed the
They
ship.
have this hilarious ship with a giant net
Mhm.
on it that goes. That's a drone ship.
The drone ship.
That
No,
goes-
that one isn't a drone ship. I don't think. I think that one has a crew on it.
Really?
Yeah, because it's like they rent those out, kind of thing.
Okay.
They lease them out.
All
I
right.
think. Yeah, but that one, or at least there's a like crew that goes along with it if the ship itself is a drone ship. But they either got new ships or they renamed it, and it used to be Mr. Steven, but now it's Miss Tess. And so there are a lot of good memes about how have a man try to do it a bunch of different times, you can't get it done, and then the first time the woman goes out, she gets it done.
Right.
And it's funny. But only one of them was caught, but that's pretty good.
Other space news.
Other space news is there was the bolide.
Yeah.
There's a bolide, which is a fireball kind of thing, a meteorite that hit the atmosphere sort of near Puerto Rico. And was actually detected with a bunch of upper atmospheric infrared detectors that are generally used for detecting like nuclear
Incoming missiles.
Yeah, incoming missiles or nuclear things that are happening around the world.
Unfortunately, this was not mistaken for such a thing.
Correct, yeah.
So I feel like that must happen a lot, right? No? Seems crazy. I mean, like, bolides are
So-
not uncommon, and I
Yes.
know we're watching everywhere all the time with these things. Right?
Correct,
So
yeah.
the military must see these things all the time.
They
Why
do.
is this a news thing?
I wasn't sure why this one made it into the news. I think it's because it was bigger than a lot of the ones we see. Like, it was a
Yeah.
pretty big impact. But there's all this data that scientists don't have access to about upper atmospheric bolides that would be super interesting to have, like, or the really fine stuff that hits in the upper levels.
Right.
That's data that exists, and we know
It's
it exists
top
from
secret.
talking to folks, but it's not accessible.
It would be
Right.
great for us to learn more about the near-Earth impact influx
Mhm.
and near-Earth asteroid population, all that stuff.
How it changes over time.
Right.
Right.
But the data was collected using
Military.
things to look for these incoming missiles, and
Right.
so we're not allowed to know anything about that.
Yeah.
Well, not.
Yeah, so this one was a multi-meter sized near-Earth asteroid. So it was like a pretty big object that hit, but it fragmented and ripped apart. But so there's some pretty cool trails that they caught.
Right.
It was fun.
So sort of transitioning then, as sort of a hybrid space news science is the Dragonfly, which we mentioned. And so that's been selected. It's going to launch in 2026 for arrival at Saturn in 2034. And
That's pretty fast.
I'm kind of amazed that we're sending a spacecraft back to Saturn so soon after Cassini. I'm excited. I think it's a very cool mission.
Yeah.
It's a dual quadcopter.
Yeah. Is that just an
is it an-
octocopter?
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I would have said octocopter, but they refer to it as a dual quadcopter. So it has 4 pairs of counter-rotating
Mhm.
blades. And as we've just talked about before, one of the things we love about Titan, Jim's favorite aspect of Titan is
That you
Jim
can-
forgot what he likes about
Well,
Titan.
because there's so many things.
There's
'Cause
so
I thought,
many things.
hey, there's
Is
lakes
it-
that I can
is it the
fish in, but
fishing?
also,
Right.
no, it's,
Fishing
it's
is your
that you
second
can
favorite
fly.
You can fly.
You can
Right?
fly
With
by-
some like very modest
Exertion.
like hand
Icarus-like.
wing thingies or something like that, right?
Just the costume from your kids' elementary school play.
right,
of
yeah,
wings.
Yeah,
You
then
put those on.
because the atmosphere is thick and the gravity is weak, and
Right.
if you combine those two things, it makes it very easy to fly, which is a great
Is
reason
awesome.
to send a copter there.
A
Right.
gym.
So the gravity on Titan is less than the gravity on our moon.
Mhm.
So our moon wins, Addie.
Yeah.
And that's about our moon has about 1/6
1/6.
as much gravity as Earth, and this one has somewhat less than that.
It's less, I
don't
want
know
to say
the number.
12%. So about 1/8. It might be even less than that, but it's on the order of about 10% of the Earth's gravity. So
Right.
if you weigh 150 pounds, you weigh 15 pounds on
Right.
Titan. You got to add something for all of the stuff you're wearing to keep yourself warm and
Right.
breathing.
Right. That's not that much, right? I mean, the
well,
atmospheric pressure is fine, so you don't need a big pressure. So you just
Right.
need
You need
like a
you need-
parka
with a
and
heater.
an oxygen. With a, yeah.
You need some.
Yeah.
I think you want active heating, not just insulation. So
Yeah.
You need
Right.
a parka with a heater,
Yeah.
probably maybe multiple heaters, those things that you get when you go skiing,
Yeah.
and oxygen, a
warmers.
little oxygen tank. And we've frequently, I think I've certainly contributed to this misunderstanding about the density of the atmosphere. The atmospheric pressure at the surface of Titan is 1.5 times the pressure in this room, 50% greater than Earth.
Right.
But the
But if you go
density,
outside, it's the same. Just kidding. It's very humid here in Florida today.
the density of the atmosphere at the surface of Titan is actually 4 times the density of the atmosphere on the surface of the Earth,
Oh,
because
okay.
of that weaker gravity
Yeah.
doesn't
Right.
compress, so the weight of all that extra air is not as great.
Right.
So the
Mhm.
pressure isn't as much greater, but the density is 4 times greater, so it's a little bit soupy air.
Right.
So that's makes it a lot
We
easier.
feel right at home.
We're flapping our arms here, so that makes it a lot
Yeah.
easier to fly around as a person, so we say.
Right.
And this quadcopter, of course, therefore is going to be able to fly, and it's a pretty good-sized beast. We talked earlier about, on a previous episode, about this tech demonstration of a little helicopter they're sending to Mars.
Yeah,
Right.
to go with
And that's
2020.
that's just going like hop and say, yes, I can fly on Mars. It's just going to go up a few meters, fly around maybe a few meters, and that's it. Just sort of
Yeah.
a tech demo.
Mars atmosphere pretty thin.
Very thin
Yeah, radically
atmosphere.
different.
It's very hard to do any sort of like
Aerodynamic stuff.
helicopter aerodynamic stuff in Mars
Yeah.
atmosphere.
Even the parachutes are
Yeah, they have
not good for
trouble.
much,
No.
right? And so,
Gotta do the bouncy
and
balls.
also it's got a stronger gravitational pull than Titan.
Mm-hmm.
So that little copter's a little tiny thing. Dragonfly is a pretty big, sort of golf cart sized science rover for,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sort of a rover size, like a large Mars rover sized thing, but instead of driving around, it'll fly around. And Titan is this cool sort of planetary moon. I mean, it's bigger than Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
It's got lakes,
Right.
right?
Not of water, but of ethane, methane. kind of
Methane.
stuff,
Right, as the Brits would say.
Mhm.
Yeah, methane.
And so rain that's feeding those lakes and
Right.
rivers, and it has dunes of hydrocarbon sand and all
Yeah.
sorts of cool stuff
There's a
going
lot
on.
of astrobiological implications, which is a lot of this mission sort of has astrobiology implications and
Right.
interest.
Deep in the interior, at some level deep in the interior of Titan, there is also liquid water,
Mm-hmm.
ocean. So I'm like super excited. It's like, let's fly around over the whole place. Unfortunately,
It's not quite.
can't really fly around over the whole place. So its nominal mission is 2.7 years, and they're predicting a total flight distance in that time of on the order of a couple hundred kilometers or so,
Yeah.
about 100 and some miles total.
But maybe it'll be like like Spirit and Oppie that went many,
It
many,
may-
many,
it
many
may
miles.
as
past
well.
what
I
we
assume
do
this is
with
going to have
target.
a
Multi-mission
Radio as its
RTG,
own, but
yeah,
yeah.
MMRTG for power. So its power is not solar derived, it's very dim sunlight, very thick, cloudy, actually hazy atmosphere.
right.
Yeah.
So there's not much sunlight at the surface. It's like, what did Amanda Hendricks told us, that if you walked outside in the daytime on Titan, it's like 15 minutes after sunset on the Earth or something. I mean, it's
Is it
pretty,
really that bright?
well, I don't know what the exact time was, but it's not a daytime level of,
No.
Right.
it's not an Earth level of daytime
Because you're
brightness.
far, yeah, and it's a really thick atmosphere.
Right. So yeah, take long exposure and stuff like that. And there's no sun to power your batteries, but they've got this radioisotope thing, so they'll recharge their batteries. Titan's got about a 14-day day,
Day?
so it'll do its work during its 7-ish day, and then at night, I guess it'll. It mentioned recharging.
Yeah, it's
although-
going to use the MMRTGs to recharge the batteries.
Okay, so it'll feed power from those into batteries and then do its stuff, and it'll mostly sit in one place and explore that place with cameras and studying the chemical composition of the local atmosphere and the surface, and then occasionally it'll take off and go to the next place. So the two places that they're starting in the sand dune region on
Seems
the
dangerous. What if they get like mired in the sand dune or something?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure they're going to do some
I'm
testing.
scared.
You're scared.
Yeah.
You're worried it's like quicksand.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. This is always dangerous, right? The surfaces of
Yes,
other worlds, you
yeah.
never really know.
it's true.
I was surprised, not having given it any thought at all. I was a little bit surprised that was their original target landing
The
spot.
sand dune?
So it's in these dune regions, and these
Mhm.
dunes are not sand like we have, not silica sand, but they're hydrocarbon, sort
Yeah.
of like tar sands,
Mhm.
probably. And
So they're probably sticky.
yeah, but at very low temperatures, so they might
Yeah,
not
that's
be.
true. That's true.
And it's eventually going to work its way towards a specific crater, and there aren't a huge number of craters on Titan, partly because it's got this big atmosphere that burns stuff up, just like the one that you were
Yeah.
describing that we saw burning
Yeah.
the Earth's atmosphere.
But also because it has resurfacing, it has
It's
rain,
erosion.
It has,
erosion,
has
all
all
that
the things
stuff.
that,
we
same
have
things
here.
going on the Earth that cover up craters, why we don't
Yeah.
have.
Right.
So they have got identified a specific crater they want to go to, and they want to go down to
really?
the bottom of that crater,
Ooh.
because they think that may have give them some more clues as to what's going on in the subsurface. So they may have their sort of best access there to learning about the interior of Titan. It arrives 2034, 2.5-year nominal mission. But as far as I know, because the RTGs, they have a gradual long decay
Yeah.
of their power output, should be able to go for a while.
So
Yeah,
check
so-
back with Walkabout the Galaxy in 2034. We'll tell you all about what we find.
We'll give you a launch report on our next episode in 2026.
Yeah.
And then the next episode after that in 2034. And then we retire.
If you're only interested in the Dragonfly missions. I'm sure we'll have other updates in the meantime too, because they're still working on developing a lot of the instruments and a lot of the technology and stuff like
Right,
that. So
absolutely.
it's going to have a mass spectrometer to look at chemistry, right? So it's very interested in astrology, as we said. So it wants to look at the chemistry of the sand dunes and the different organics on the surface.
One of the things that the Huygens probe, which was carried by Cassini, that landed on Titan. So we've already, kind of amazingly, humans have already landed on Titan with a thing, and it took pictures from the surface, and it was really does make you look at that and say, gee, I'd love to go for a drive or a fly across that surface.
Yeah, it's very Earth-like.
One of the things that the Huygens probe had was this pathetic little lamp, but since it's so cold there, a pathetic little lamp really heats things up.
Mm-hmm.
And it heated up the surface and then sniffed
Oh, really?
the molecules that were
Oh.
evaporating out of the surface. I don't know if Dragonfly is doing something similar to that, but it's also going to be measuring atmospheric chemistry while it's hopping around from place to place.
Yeah.
And it's like the drones that your creepy neighbor has to spy on your backyard. It's got a downward facing camera, so when it's flying around, it'll check out any sunbathers or whatever out there on Titan.
I think it also has like little drilly type things in the rotor skids so that they can like take little samples.
Yeah.
Well, if you're gonna send, you're gonna spend all this time and money and send something out there.
Yeah.
Pack as much crap
Gotta-
on there as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn as much as we can.
It's pretty sweet. So Dragonfly was selected. It's the 4th New Frontiers mission.
The first
So-
one was New Horizons to Pluto. The
Mhm.
second one was Juno to Jupiter. The third one is Osiris Rex.
Osiris Rex.
Which-
Currently active.
Currently active and orbiting, as is Juno.
Yep.
As is New Horizons.
That's true. Oh man.
Yeah.
But I think they'll all. So New Horizons will be too far, I think, by the time this mission happens. So it probably won't still be operational, really. And then OREX will be back by then, by 2034. I think OREX will
Yes.
be back way before that.
Yes.
Yeah. And
In
then
the 20s. OREX coming up, we'll have an announcement about target selection. So OREX is retrieving a piece of the asteroid that it's been orbiting for some months now. It's checked it out, it's mapped it. In principle, in July next month, July 2019, they'll be announcing where they're going to get their samples from to bring back to Earth. Before we talk about the other moon and
other moon.
the FRBs, the Furbies,
I remember Furbies.
we'll have our trivia for you to ponder.
All right.
In honor of our sponsor, drones, and the selection of Dragonfly, we have a drone-inspired trivia.
I'm shocked. This is a very thematic episode.
We
Excellent.
always try to have everything. In
Stay
science is all
on
about connections,
Yeah.
right? Everything is. There was a great series when I was a kid on PBS called Connections. It was one of these great BBC things. It was like, and so. Anyway,
Yep.
I digress.
What's the trivia question?
Douglas Trumbull,
Yep.
one of 4 credited with the special effects for 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the person who created this famous Stargate sequence at the end of that film. And he, by the way, did that when he was like, he finished working on 2001 when he was 25. Started working on it when he was like 22 or 23
Oh, wow.
years old. Originally in 2001, the destination planet was supposed to be not Jupiter, but,
Saturn?
yes, whew, and it is Saturn in Arthur C. Clarke's story, The Sentinel, which he sort of wrote contemporaneously with the development of 2001 to be the inspiration, of that story with Kubrick. But they weren't able to get a good depiction, special effects rendering of Saturn's rings in time for the movie, so they changed the destination from Saturn to Jupiter
Oh.
because of the rings. Trumbull kept working on this and actually got what he was happy with in terms of representation of Saturn's rings for movie, and developed a story and showed them, and they appeared in a movie that featured 3 so-called drone robots named Huey, Louie, and Dewey, and the trivia is, what is the name of that movie?
When you said his name, I knew what movie this was, but I can't think of the title.
Well, I have it as a multiple choice. For me, this is such an easy thing, but then I have to keep remembering that
Wait, don't tell us
Most
the multiple
people-
choice yet.
most people are not as like obsessed with stupid stuff as
Yeah.
I am.
Right.
Don't
So
tell us the movie
don't give
yet,
you
or
the-
the
don't
multiple
give you the
choice yet.
choice.
This is
Alright,
probably
I'll
gonna be
just
one of
leave it
these
as-
that's like you know it or you don't. But I need the
Well,
multiple choice because I
no.
don't think I do.
Okay, we'll do the multiple choice when we come back to answer the question.
Okay, I'll give you
Okay.
the choices
'Cause I
so
wanna
you
try
can
to think about
see
it.
if you can
Yeah.
pull it out of as a free response, as we call it in
Right.
the classroom, the free response question. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Our
I
other,
can picture the movie, but I can't think of the name of it.
Mhm.
What's
Yeah.
wrong with me?
I've heard of those drones. I just,
Huey, Louie, and Dewey.
Yeah, I remember
it's
that.
not
some-
DuckTales.
and they were very
some vague
heartbreaking.
way.
It's not DuckTales.
I think I'm gonna do it.
They're all DuckTales.
We'll see.
Multiple choice, and
Okay,
you'll get it.
okay.
All right, so the other movie we're going to talk about is Europa.
Europa.
So let's hear the Europa report.
So Europa, as we said before, is this ice-covered moon of Jupiter.
With no atmosphere to speak
No
of.
atmosphere
Yeah.
to speak of, but you don't need an atmosphere. I mean, typically, if you want liquid on your surface, you need an atmosphere because you need the pressure that an atmosphere creates.
Mhm.
Or not just typically, but always.
Always.
But you can have an ocean if you cover it with something
Liquid
else.
water.
Pretty much any liquid.
Yeah,
you need
yeah.
pressure
You need
to
some
keep
pressure.
it as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
liquid.
What about Mercury?
I
I
don't
think it
know.
would-
I
I think it
that
would
still
evaporate.
Everything's
Yeah.
going to
Long
go.
scale.
Everything,
Yeah. It'll
Nature abhors
evaporate.
vacuum.
Yeah. So, in any event,
Why
another
does
way
it
you
make
can
so
get
much of it?
another way you can get liquid is cover with ice or something like that. So that's what
Mhm.
Europa is doing. This big ocean underneath, and not only is it an ocean, but it's a saltwater ocean. And I think we've
It's
known
salty.
that it's salty for a very long time. But I think we had assumed
So
that
this
it was
wasn't
like
this wasn't a salty surprise.
Oh.
no, I don't even know what that means.
That's fine.
for
You don't
you.
need to.
It assumed that it was not. So when we say salt in astronomy and chemistry and physics,
Yeah.
it doesn't always mean the same thing.
It doesn't mean
that-
table salt.
Doesn't-
Yeah, table salt is what?
NaCl.
NaCl,
Sodium
chloride.
sodium chloride. But many things in chemistry are both salts that do similar things to sodium chloride. And
What's
so
the
what do they
definition
do?
of a salt?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We're not chemists here. I don't know.
We're not chemists.
The
Well,
chemistry
it's
is
just like-
undeniable, Jim.
Well, it's just like it's a mineral compound composed of. Oh no. I almost said that. I was just gonna
You were
say,
about to say something.
sodium chloride. I was like, that's not right. Stop it.
Oh, but like potassium chloride, and there are
Oh,
whole
it's also a
piles of
2010 film with Angelina Jolie.
It is.
I remember that one.
salt. Oh yeah. But anyway, there are lots of kinds of salts out there. So when we say a saltwater ocean, we don't necessarily mean the same kind. Of course, the salt in our oceans there are a bunch of salts, but is largely
Primary one is
table
NaCl.
salt, which is NaCl. And we had thought that not to be the case, or didn't really know what the case was in Europa's oceans, but recently they've made some measurements, and I admit ignorance is exactly how they made these measurements, but they basically, I think, they took table salt, irradiated it on Earth here, and then looked at the spectrum of light that comes
Right.
off of that and compared it to the spectrum of light they see from these
where the
cracked places on
right.
the surface
The
of
important thing
Europa.
is that we haven't seen the water
Right.
in
Yes.
the Europa's ocean.
Right.
We've detected
We're not
it
seeing
from
that. Well,
gravitational measurements.
We know it's there from gravitational
some,
measurements.
maybe some outgassing stuff that's maybe been seen in some plumes.
Yeah.
But
we really know it's there from the sort of gravitational thing, and then there's
Yeah.
all this geophysical evidence
Right.
that it's got this very young surface, so the water is, so things are sort of, those ice is sort of moving around, not exactly analogously to tectonic plates on the Earth, but it's shifting around in some ways, and then the water's erupting onto the surface, and it's those eruptions on the surface then puts that salty water on the surface,
Right.
which then this water freezes and the salts get irradiated, as you were saying,
Right.
and that leaves these spots on the surface of Europe that are sort of brownish,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yellowish,
Yeah.
brownish.
Right. And so our most recent analysis suggests that it's a lot of table salt, that it's a lot of actual NaCl instead of these weird like Epsom salt type things that we thought that it might be. And that tells a kind of a neat story. Like, so how you get my understanding of this, and I don't have a deep understanding of it. This is a
Is it
very
as deep as
superficial
Europa's
understanding.
oceans?
Is that the origin of the salt
Mhm.
might be different if it's table salt versus some of these other salts. So that
You have to
the
have
origin
tables.
of the table salt is very likely to be these hydrothermal vents on the floor of the
Oh.
oceans. And that's cool because if those are there,
Mhm.
that
There's
means
heat and energy.
And when you have energy and water and carbon and other stuff,
You have
then
giant space serpents.
then you probably have giant space serpents. So this is just this further evidence that this is maybe a place that is possibly hospitable to life. Pretty
The
cool.
Wikipedia says that salt is an ionic compound that can be formed by the neutralization reaction of an acid and a base.
It does say
All
that.
right, fair enough.
It's usually, so they're minerals called halides, and those tend to be in salts because they combine in the right ways. So it's like sodium and potassium and those kinds of things.
Right.
Yeah. Salt, I was gonna say something about salts. I don't know. I'm sure it was a great joke though.
I was just saying, that, yeah, the kind of salt that we kind of assumed they were before wouldn't necessarily have been created in hydrothermal vents, could just be leached off of the rock
Yeah.
underneath, but this kind of salt is more likely a result of these hydrothermal vents, which is kind of a
Cool.
cool result.
It's also cool just that it's chemically similar to what we have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
nice that there's some consistency, which is not, I mean, that's pretty, in the solar system, things tend to be consistent.
We'll learn more about those things with the Europa Clipper mission.
Yeah.
Right, so what is
Oh,
that
that's what I was
mission
gonna say.
supposed to
Do you
exactly?
think Europa's salty because it hasn't had a mission yet?
Oh. Thank you.
You're welcome. Europa
So-
Clipper.
Yeah, it's a Clipper. I don't know why it's called Europa Clipper. Clipper is in the kind of old sailing vessel kind
Yeah.
of Clipper for some reason.
Yeah.
This is a mission that is in progress in development. It is not a New Frontiers class mission. It's a NASA flagship mission.
Flagship mission.
That's the same kind of mission that Cassini was, and before that,
So this is,
Voyagers,
yeah, so
that kind of thing.
NASA is the one. in
There's
charge
no
of this.
PI of the mission. There are principal investigators for the individual instruments on board, and former original top astroquark Tracy Becker is working on one of those instruments.
All right.
The ultraviolet spectrometer that is going on the Europa Clipper mission. And that launches in a few years, in
Yeah.
the early 20s. I don't remember the exact
I
date.
don't remember the exact, I think it's not set. I think that's why we don't remember it. I think it's still TBD.
Okay, there may be some launch vehicle issues with that because they may have been looking at the
Interesting to get there.
SLS or
Yeah,
launch
it needs
vehicle.
it needs a heavy launch vehicle, and most of those are still up and coming. So I think they're
Right.
not quite sure yet.
But that particular spacecraft, so it's going to Jupiter, obviously. It will not orbit Europa. So it will orbit Jupiter
Oh, I just
On-
swing by.
on an orbit that takes it on virtually every orbit with a flyby of Europa.
And I think it's a pretty elliptical orbit, so that it keeps it further out
is,
more often,
where it's safer.
safer. Because when you're in near Europa, there's a lot of radiation and all that. Same thing Juno's doing, right? Is staying
Right.
as far out as much as possible, and then coming closer in.
Dip
so.
in, dip a toe in the water,
Yeah.
get your measurements, and then run away. Jupiter, unlike Saturn, the reason we talk about this for Jupiter, we never do for Saturn. Jupiter's got a very intense radiation belts, basically the equivalent of the Van Allen belts in the Earth's magnetosphere. At Jupiter, there's a lot of fast-moving, so energetic protons and electrons in Jupiter's magnetosphere, and especially in close.
Mm-hmm.
And so that destroys your nice electronic instruments on your spacecraft.
Yes.
And so in those close-in moons, so Europa is the Io Europa Ganymede Callisto. It's the number 2 out from the planet Galilean satellite, so it's in pretty close.
Right.
So it's a radiation dangerous environment. So that's one reason why you don't want to just hang around there and be
Right.
orbiting the moon. The other is it takes a lot of energy to say, okay, I'm going to not orbit Jupiter. I'm
But
now
orbit
going to
Europa
change my
instead.
velocity so that I'm orbiting that moon instead.
And they could probably have put it into an orbit that was like sort of a follow along with Europa kind of orbit, but I think that but that's dangerous.
Energetically, that's
Energetically, it's
also
possible,
difficult, but also the radiation is a challenge.
Yeah.
So it's doing a few dozen orbits of Jupiter in a nominal mission with a flyby of Europa on all those times. So it's a little bit frustrating because you want to just hang out
Yeah.
and get all the great mapping and everything of the whole planet like we do with the Mars missions.
Yeah.
But so you can be swinging by multiple times, and it's a
That's some
challenge
good stuff.
from celestial mechanics point of view to make sure that your swing bys see
Are at the
different
right time.
parts of it
Right.
Yeah.
each time, because the moon is synced up with Jupiter as it goes around.
Yeah, these are really complicated calculations because every time you swing by, that affects its orbit, and you have
Right.
to make sure that it's.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's tough.
Good thing we have good computers.
Yeah.
And clever
We-
people.
Also said we were gonna fall back. We said we were gonna give a shout out to the Caesar mission. Which
Yes.
was not selected, so it was a comet sample return mission. So it's sort of like OSIRIS-REx, where it was gonna have a little touch and go sampler.
And
It was super cool. modifications to the sampler because they were going to have to cryogenically cool the samples the whole time they came back.
Right.
And
So they're getting it from a comet, so icy
comet.
stuff.
Yeah. So.
And the comet they were going to get it from is the comet that Rosetta went to.
Yeah.
The same
67P.
comet that we've sort of mapped out and explored, so we knew a lot about it from that. So they knew it's like, okay, we know we can go to that comet and get stuff. So that may be for a future mission opportunity.
Yeah. It was it's surprising it didn't get selected. As a lot of mission heritage. There was some stuff that's harder. It's also like we're doing Osiris-Rex right now. Maybe
Yeah.
it's more exciting. And Titan's awesome. So it'll
Titan's
be good.
awesome.
Yeah, it seems like
It's very exciting to think about. We're flying a dual quadcopter,
Yeah.
an
An
octocopter
I think it
around
just
Titan.
I think because the people who I don't know who exactly makes these decisions. It just sounds cool. So
Yeah,
I think at this level it probably had to be signed off by
obviously
the
better than
NASA
that,
administrator.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so obviously you have to have great science and a low risk and technical feasibility. That's what they spent their phase A time studying.
Mhm.
And to me, it's an exciting choice.
Agreed.
And Steve Squires has had a bunch of missions. He's fine. I'm just kidding.
He's the PI of
He was the PI.
the other mission. He was the PI of the Spirit and Opportunity rovers on Mars.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's
And
he's-
something else. He's on something else right now, but I forget which mission.
Right.
Yeah, no, he's great.
let's hear about Furbies,
Zibby
Turtle.
Zibby Turtle is the PI of
Of-
the Dragonfly missions.
right,
And she's
at Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins. She's a
Applied
Titan
Physics
scientist. She's
What was her
awesome.
first name?
Zibby.
Her
That's
first
awesome.
name is
It's
Elizabeth.
Oh, but she goes
She
by
goes by
Zibby. That's the first
Yeah,
time I've
yeah.
heard that. That's pretty
I
awesome.
know, right?
She was on the Cassini mission for the
Okay.
duration. So
you must
I
know her well.
I
Yeah.
know her from Cassini meetings. Yeah.
Excellent.
Let's hear about Furbies. Congrats to her and also to
Yeah.
the Caesar team for
Yeah,
uh,
making it this far.
Furbies, fast radio bursts. So this is just a fun get outside of the solar system. In fact, not just get outside of the solar system, get the hell outside of the galaxy here. And
that's Jim's always dreaming. How can I get
how can I get the hell out of this galaxy?
galaxy?
I know. Well, the Milky Way is very constraining.
It's a little bit
It's
of a
very
loner.
tiny.
It's like send me out to intergalactic space.
Yeah. Fast radio bursts are these class of phenomenon that we've seen, and we may have mentioned them a time or two before, but it's basically just very intense radio burst that comes from very distant source, typically not repeating. So I think one of the fast radio bursts has repeated, but most of them are just like you see this single burst of radio. When I say intense radio light, I don't mean here on Earth intense.
Right.
Intense where they were. I mean, we're seeing these coming from galaxies that are, very,
Far
very,
away.
very far away. I think that cool little analogy, but I think these are considerably like 1,000 times less intense than if you sent a cell phone signal from the moon.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
that's the amount of signal that we're getting from this.
Yeah.
So our radio telescopes are ridiculously sensitive to these things, and that doesn't sound like much, but if you go backwards and think about the amount of energy created at the source, it's like, I mean, these are like millisecond long bursts of radio light, and it's like the amount of energy released by the thing that created that had to be some huge, like the amount of energy released by the sun over centuries.
Yeah.
So
Something big happens.
something big
And we just
powerful
sort of see
happened.
this sort of blip in a random direction typically.
Right.
And that's partly because, right, they are so fast. Like,
They're
they're
so
going to be
fast.
hard to capture.
They're going to be hard to capture, and it's very hard, to figure out where something like that came from, because you just see the one burst for a millisecond.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very hard to locate where they come from. So the kind of cool new news that we had is that we've found one that we can identify the source of and I don't actually know I don't know how they figured that out, but we found what direction it came from, which means that you can find out what galaxy it came from, and specifically they could find out that it was not the center of this particular galaxy that came
That's
from.
amazing.
On the outside of this guy, which is cool because, well, we don't know what the source of these things are, right? They're
Yeah.
a mystery. We don't know what's causing this, what astrophysical phenomenon is producing this much energy. So one of the, or several, a class of the explanations has been something to do with supermassive black holes at the centers of galaxies, because they
And
obviously
that's ruled out.
that's ruled out for at least for
this one.
at least this one, and so it's definitely, they're not all that, right?
Right.
Which is kind of cool. So we have, I don't know, it's an open question, but this kind of thing will help us as we study. If we can find out more and more about the positions of these things, then maybe we can look more carefully at that position and figure out what might be there.
Very cool.
There's one theory for how they form. They're called magnetars.
You're right, and that's one of the more
That's just
popular
a
ones.
fun word.
Yeah.
It is a fun word.
But those are
What is a magnetar?
They're young neutron stars. They're young stars, neutron stars that are highly magnetized, so they're
Okay.
magnetars.
And what do they do? That
They're
makes this
neutron
burst?
stars, so they're highly energetic and they make a burst.
But
Yeah, I think it has something to do with like some detangling of the magnetic field things like you see.
like a
in the sun.
reconnection event.
Yeah.
Or it's like a solar
Yeah.
Some
flare
kind of weird thing like that. But
event or something.
But yeah,
on
these,
that
I mean,
time.
neutron stars have some ridiculous magnetic fields, like
Yeah.
trillions of times stronger than Earth's
Do
magnetic field.
not
kind
take
of
your
thing.
credit cards.
No, no. Your hard drives
Will
will be erased.
Yes.
Darn it, I had a trip.
To a magnetar.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Well,
won't
they
take my
take
hard
a
drive with me.
warning before you go to one of those things, like leave your electronics.
Leave your electronics.
Yeah.
At least 2 light years away.
Right. Have you had thoughts? Has inspiration
I had a
struck
lot of thoughts.
about the drones Huey, Louie, and Dewey and what movie they appeared in? Featuring Saturn's rings. One of
I
our
guess
favorite-
give us
I need
the
the
multiple
choices.
choice.
One of our favorite times. You need the choices, so you can't.
I know
Okay.
what it is, but I can't.
All right. So don't
So
blurt
don't
it out.
blurt it out.
I won't read
Alright.
any
I don't
visible
know.
reactions.
All right. Here are your choices: Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Silent Running, The Black Hole, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and Star Crash.
Okay.
Okay. Now you can blurt it out.
Silent running.
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know. I still don't know. Say black hole.
I am kind of amazed, Jim, that you don't know. Addie is correct.
Okay.
Silent
I
Running.
believed her because she said it with
She was
significant
quite
confidence.
confident.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie came out in '72, I think.
I thought that was a movie about
I was like-
bobsledding.
It's not. Although that's also a
No,
good movie.
that's,
I don't think I've seen that movie.
So Silent. Oh my gosh, it's a cult
I only
classic.
watched it a few years ago, I think. But
Really?
Mhm.
So it's about sort of in the future where we're destroying the planet, so forests and
The
biological
present?
ecosystems
Yeah.
have been put on these ships in these domes and taken off the planet to sort of preserve all that biological diversity. And those forests are tended by these adorable little drones. And on this one ship, there's many ships, but we focus on one ship. Bruce Dern is on the ship wandering around in a bathrobe with these 3 drones, Huey, Louie, and Dewey, that water, and they look so, adorable and kind of lonely.
And the movie ends up great for them.
Yeah. So Douglas Trumbull, so the special effects guy from 2001, he had the idea for this, and he had come up with, I can do Saturn's ring. So he had a story idea. Trumbull, by the way, did the special effects also for Close Encounters, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Blade Runner. He directed only one other film after this. He directed this movie, came up with the story, directed it. He directed one other film. Any idea what that other film directed by Douglas Trumbull?
Black hole.
No. It's a movie called Brainstorm, starring Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood, with a story by Bruce Joel Rubin, who wrote the screenplay for
2001.
Deep Impact.
Oh, God.
There's a-
There it
always.
is. There it is.
Yes.
There it is. Found
Made
it.
the connection. Nice.
Yes.
Very nice.
It's all about connections.
It's all about connections.
All about connections. While it may have felt like the time to fly to Titan, it was just another episode of Walkabout the Galaxy. Be sure to like us on Facebook to get all our updates, and check out our website at walkaboutthegalaxy.com. We're also on YouTube at Walkabout the Galaxy, where you can see us flapping our arms like we're flying around. Thanks to our listeners in Latvia and around the world. Follow us on Twitter,
At walk_the_galaxy.
where you can ask us questions and suggest topics that you'd like to hear us discuss. Our theme music was composed by Richard Karusik. Our production assistant and video guru is Diego Rodriguez. Catch up on old episodes wherever you get your podcasts, and write us a review on one of those banners that you trail behind a single-engine plane and fly up and down the Florida coast,
Fly it with a drone.
for example. I'm Josh Caldwell.
I'm Addie Dove.
I'm Jim Cooney.
We're the Astroquarks, signing off until the next episode of Walkabout the Galaxy.
That's not gonna come
I don't think that came through.